She became the billionaire's unwanted bride, but what began as humiliation would soon break his pride and rewrite the meaning of love. She was the billionaire's ugly bride by force until her heart made him beg for her love. Welcome to Billionaire Stories Untold. If you enjoy deeply emotional stories of redemption and true love, please subscribe and hit the bell. Now, let us dive into the untold story that changed everything. Let us return to our main character. The storm outside the glass tower roared like a warning. Inside, beneath the cold glow of the city lights, Evelyn Clarke sat rigid in front of a long obsidian table. The air smelled of rain and power. At the other end sat Adrian Cole, the billionaire heir whose name controlled half the Manhattan skyline. His voice, low and precise, sliced through the silence. "Marry me," he said, sliding a silver folder across the table. "Think of it as a business transaction, not a fairy tale." Evelyn stared at the document. The pages were thick, the ink dark, the words colder than the marble under her heels. Clause 3. No emotional involvement, no personal interference, no expectations. She could almost hear her own heartbeat echo between the lines. Her throat tightened. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," Adrian replied. His eyes, sharp and distant, did not blink. "This will silence my family's scandal and secure your father's company from foreclosure. You get stability, I get compliance. That is all." The fluorescent light above flickered once. In its reflection, Evelyn saw herself plain, pale, a woman who never belonged in this glass world of suits and strategy. The tabloids had called her the gray girl, a face no camera wanted. Now, she was being sold as a solution. She pressed her palms together. "And if I refuse, then your father loses everything by Friday." Her pulse stumbled. The debt had already buried their small factory, the only thing her mother left behind. There was no more time, no more pride to protect. "Where do I sign?" she asked, quietly. Adrian leaned back. "Bottom right corner." When the pen met paper, a small tremor ran through her fingers. It was the sound of a life closing behind a door she did not choose. He stood, gathering the file as though it were nothing more than another merger. "Our wedding will be this Saturday. Keep it simple. My team will handle appearances." Evelyn forced a nod. "And afterward?" "Afterward," he said, fastening his cufflinks. "You go back to whatever you do when you are not pretending to be my wife. We will live separate lives. I will not ask questions. Neither will you." She rose from the chair, the city's reflection shimmering like a cage behind her. "You could have chosen anyone. I chose convenience," he answered. She swallowed the ache rising in her throat. "Then I suppose I will make it convenient for you to forget me." As she left the conference room, her reflection merged with the storm outside, fragile but unbroken. Behind her, Adrian stared at the signature she had just written, the curve of her name still glistening in ink. For the briefest moment, something unreadable crossed his face: regret, perhaps, or curiosity. But it vanished as quickly as it came. By the time the elevator doors closed around her, Evelyn whispered to herself, "No emotions, no expectations." The words tasted like metal on her tongue. Yet somewhere, beneath the weight of that contract, her heart was already rebelling. The rain had not stopped for 2 days. It carried the sound of Manhattan traffic like a restless heartbeat outside Evelyn Clarke's apartment window. The ceremony was scheduled for Saturday, only 3 days away. There was no white dress, no flowers, no bridesmaids, only a quiet transaction waiting to be completed. Her father sat on the worn couch, a hospital blanket around his shoulders, the oxygen machine whispering beside him. His eyes held the guilt of a man who had borrowed too much from people who never forgave. Evelyn placed a folder of medical bills on the table and tried to keep her voice steady. "It is all taken care of," she said softly. "You do not have to worry any more." He looked at her, confusion shadowing his face. "Evelyn, what did you do?" She forced a smile that did not reach her eyes. "I signed a contract. It will keep our home and the factory safe." He tried to rise, but the machine beeped in protest. "You did not marry for money, did you?" She turned away before the tears fell. "No, I married for time, and that is what we both need." When she left the apartment, the cold air bit at her skin, but inside, her chest burned something worse, a quiet resentment, that she had traded freedom for survival. 2 mornings later, she stood in front of a mirror in a private bridal suite, arranged by Adrian Cole's staff. The reflection was almost unrecognizable. The makeup artist had done her best to hide the scar that traced a pale line near her collarbone. Her simple satin dress looked elegant but sterile, as if designed to erase personality. The planner's assistant adjusted her veil. "You are lucky," she said. "Every woman dreams of marrying Mr. Cole." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Dreams are not the same as arrangements." Outside, the church was quiet, filled with no guests except 2 witnesses and a lawyer. The ceremony lasted 6 minutes. Adrian stood beside her, sharp in a tailored black suit, eyes distant. The pastor read the vows without emotion. When it was time for the rings, Adrian's assistant handed over a plain silver band. "Repeat after me," the pastor said. Evelyn's lips moved mechanically. The words meant nothing. When the final paper was signed, Adrian offered a handshake instead of a kiss. "Congratulations, Mrs. Cole. The press release will go out tomorrow morning." She nodded. "Do you want me to move into your residence tonight?" "For appearance, yes. My driver will take you." The car ride to his penthouse was silent, except for the hum of the engine. Through the tinted glass, the city stretched beneath them, dazzling, unreachable. When they arrived, the elevator opened into a space larger than her entire apartment building. Marble floors, walls of glass, and art that looked too expensive to feel alive. "This will be your room," Adrian said, pointing toward the guest wing. "We keep our lives separate. You may do as you please, as long as you respect privacy." "I understand," she replied. He studied her for a moment. "You seem calm." "I learned that panic changes nothing," she said quietly. He gave a small nod and turned away. "Dinner is at 7. You do not have to attend if you prefer silence." When he disappeared into his office, Evelyn looked around the vast, empty living room. Her footsteps echoed against the marble, swallowed by distance. She walked to the window, watching the rain blur the skyline. Her hand brushed against the silver band on her finger. It felt too heavy for something so small. In her bag, she found the sketchbook she had carried since college. She opened to a blank page and wrote a single line. "Today I married a man who never looked at me long enough to see who I was." She closed it, pressing the cover to her chest. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the weight of humiliation and duty, a faint spark of defiance stirred. For the first time since signing that contract, Evelyn whispered into the glass reflection. "One day, he will see me." Outside, the rain finally began to slow, but inside, the storm had only just begun. Morning light spilled across the penthouse, cold and sterile like a hospital lamp. Evelyn Clarke woke before dawn, unsure whether she had slept at all. The silence inside the glass walls felt heavier than the storm outside. Somewhere down the hall, she heard Adrian Cole's voice, a steady rhythm of power and precision. He was already on a conference call, speaking about market shares, not marriages. She stood at the edge of the kitchen island, the marble surface too perfect to touch. A breakfast tray waited, prepared by the staff, untouched by him. The note beside the plate was written in bold ink, "Breakfast is optional, rules are not." Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the second page. 3 sentences. Mote. No emotional involvement. Hi. No interference with business or personal affairs. Evelyn. No lies under any circumstances. Evelyn exhaled slowly. The words felt more like shackles than boundaries. She whispered to herself, "No love, no interference, no lies." Saying it out loud made it sound like a promise she already knew she would break. Later that morning, she was escorted to the media office downstairs, where the Cole family's communications director waited with a forced smile. "Mrs. Cole, the public announcement will go out today. We need a few photos of you and Mr. Cole together. Think of it as brand alignment." Brand alignment. The phrase echoed like a mockery. Evelyn nodded and followed the photographer's instructions. Adrian appeared minutes later, dressed impeccably, every movement calculated. "Stand closer," the photographer said. "You two look distant." Adrian's jaw flexed. He placed his hand lightly on her waist, barely touching. The camera flashed. In that moment, she realized he could fake affection as easily as he closed business deals. After the session, she tried to leave quietly, but his voice stopped her. "You are doing well." "Thank you," she replied. "I need you to remember the rules," he said without emotion. This marriage is a shield, not a home. Evelyn met his gaze. Do you always have to sound like a contract? He hesitated for half a second. Contracts keep people honest. No, she said softly. They keep people afraid. For the first time, he looked at her as if seeing something unexpected. But then his phone rang, and the moment disappeared. He turned away to take the call, leaving her with the echo of his footsteps and the smell of expensive cologne fading into the air. That evening, she explored the penthouse alone. The rooms felt like exhibitions perfectly designed, painfully empty. On a low table near the living room, she found an old photograph inside a silver frame. Adrian as a boy, standing beside a woman who looked proud but tired. Behind them, the family mansion stretched wide like a fortress. Evelyn studied his younger face, noticing something human there, something the world had beaten out of him. She whispered, "What happened to you?" No answer came, only the hum of the city below. When she returned to her room, she opened her sketchbook again. She drew the 3 rules, each one inside a small iron cage. Then she added a 4th, unspoken line beneath them. Bone. When he breaks first, remember who you are. The next morning brought the first of many public appearances. Adrian's car arrived exactly on time. Inside, the air smelled of leather and restraint. He scrolled through his phone while she stared out the window at the city that had never cared who she was. "Do not speak unless asked," he said quietly. "My grandfather will be there." "Understood." At the Cole Foundation charity brunch, every eye followed her. Whispers spread faster than champagne bubbles. She heard fragments. Why her? Is that really the wife? Poor girl. Evelyn kept her chin high, her smile calm. When a reporter asked how it felt to marry a man like Adrian Cole, she answered gently, "It feels like learning how to breathe in a room with no air." Adrian froze beside her, but the cameras loved it. For the first time, she had found a way to fight back without raising her voice. That night, when they returned home, he stopped her at the elevator. "Do not ever speak to the press that way again." "Why?" she asked. "Because I told the truth?" He stared at her for a long second, then pressed the elevator button without replying. As the doors closed, Evelyn saw his reflection in the mirrored glass. For all his control, something in his eyes looked unsettled, as if the woman he thought he had purchased was already slipping out of his grasp. Morning light spilled across the penthouse, cold and sterile like a hospital lamp. Evelyn Clarke woke before dawn, unsure whether she had slept at all. The silence inside the glass walls felt heavier than the storm outside. Somewhere down the hall, she heard Adrian Cole's voice, a steady rhythm of power and precision. He was already on a conference call, speaking about market shares, not marriages. She stood at the edge of the kitchen island, the marble surface too perfect to touch. A breakfast tray waited, prepared by the staff, untouched by him. The note beside the plate was written in bold ink, "Breakfast is optional. Rules are not." Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the second page. 3 sentences. Mote. No emotional involvement. High. No interference with business or personal affairs. Bah. No lies under any circumstances. Evelyn exhaled slowly. The words felt more like shackles than boundaries. She whispered to herself, "No love, no interference, no lies." Saying it out loud made it sound like a promise she already knew she would break. Later that morning, she was escorted to the media office downstairs where the Cole family's communications director waited with a forced smile. "Mrs. Cole, the public announcement will go out today. We need a few photos of you and Mr. Cole together. Think of it as brand alignment." Brand alignment. The phrase echoed like a mockery. Evelyn nodded and followed the photographer's instructions. Adrian appeared minutes later, dressed impeccably, every movement calculated. "Stand closer," the photographer said. "You two look distant." Adrian's jaw flexed. He placed his hand lightly on her waist, barely touching. The camera flashed. In that moment, she realized he could fake affection as easily as he closed business deals. After the session, she tried to leave quietly, but his voice stopped her. "You are doing well." "Thank you," she replied. "I need you to remember the rules," he said without emotion. "This marriage is a shield, not a home." Evelyn met his gaze. "Do you always have to sound like a contract?" He hesitated for half a second. "Contracts keep people honest." "No," she said softly. "They keep people afraid." For the first time, he looked at her as if seeing something unexpected. But then his phone rang, and the moment disappeared. He turned away to take the call, leaving her with the echo of his footsteps and the smell of expensive cologne fading into the air. That evening, she explored the penthouse alone. The rooms felt like exhibitions perfectly designed, painfully empty. On a low table near the living room, she found an old photograph inside a silver frame. Adrian as a boy, standing beside a woman who looked proud but tired. Behind them, the family mansion stretched wide like a fortress. Evelyn studied his younger face, noticing something human there, something the world had beaten out of him. She whispered, "What happened to you?" No answer came, only the hum of the city below. When she returned to her room, she opened her sketchbook again. She drew the 3 rules, each one inside a small iron cage. Then she added a 4th, unspoken line beneath them. Bon. When he breaks first, remember who you are. The next morning brought the first of many public appearances. Adrian's car arrived exactly on time. Inside, the air smelled of leather and restraint. He scrolled through his phone while she stared out the window at the city that had never cared who she was. "Do not speak unless asked," he said quietly. "My grandfather will be there." Understood. At the Cole Foundation charity brunch, every eye followed her. Whispers spread faster than champagne bubbles. She heard fragments. "Why her? Is that really the wife? Poor girl." Evelyn kept her chin high, her smile calm. When a reporter asked how it felt to marry a man like Adrian Cole, she answered gently, "It feels like learning how to breathe in a room with no air." Adrian froze beside her, but the cameras loved it. For the first time, she had found a way to fight back without raising her voice. That night, when they returned home, he stopped her at the elevator. "Do not ever speak to the press that way again." "Why?" she asked. "Because I told the truth." He stared at her for a long second, then pressed the elevator button without replying. As the doors closed, Evelyn saw his reflection in the mirrored glass. For all his control, something in his eyes looked unsettled, as if the woman he thought he had purchased was already slipping out of his grasp. Evelyn Clarke woke to the sound of footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. The staff moved like shadows, careful not to make eye contact. Every morning in the Cole penthouse began the same way: coffee brewing, newspaper on the counter, and silence thick enough to feel physical. A week had passed since the charity event, yet the image of her standing beside Adrian Cole was still plastered across every magazine stand in the city. "The Mysterious Bride," one headline read. Another called her "the billionaire's charity wife." She did not know whether to laugh or to disappear. That morning, the housekeeper entered quietly. "Mr. Cole asked me to give you this, ma'am." Evelyn took the envelope. Inside was a schedule printed in Adrian's sharp handwriting: etiquette lessons, wardrobe fittings, and a gala rehearsal at the Cole Foundation. At the bottom, one line in red ink caught her eye: "Remember the rules." She folded the paper slowly. "I remember," she whispered. Hours later, she stood in a designer's studio surrounded by silk and judgment. The stylist, a woman with icy perfume and a clipboard, circled Evelyn like a scientist studying a specimen. "You are tall enough, but we must adjust your posture. You look too shy, too uncertain. A billionaire's wife needs presence." Evelyn met her eyes in the mirror. "Maybe confidence does not come from posture." The woman frowned. "Confidence is an accessory. Mrs. Cole, learn to wear it." The afternoon stretched long, filled with fittings and small humiliations. When Evelyn returned to the penthouse, her head throbbed. Adrian was in the living room, reviewing documents. Without looking up, he said, "The stylist called. She said you were difficult." "I was honest," Evelyn replied. "There is a difference." He set his papers down and finally looked at her. "You are part of a brand now. Honesty is not the goal. Consistency is." "Consistency," she repeated. "Sounds a lot like pretending." Adrian exhaled through his nose, the way people do when they want control but are losing it. "Do you want to embarrass me again?" Her voice stayed calm. "I only embarrassed your expectations." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then, instead of anger, he gave a faint, almost reluctant smile. "You have more courage than sense, Mrs. Cole. Maybe that is what it takes to survive you, Mr. Cole." Something flickered in his eyes: amusement, maybe admiration, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. 2 days later, the gala rehearsal arrived. The Cole Foundation ballroom glowed with chandeliers and polished marble. Evelyn followed Adrian through the maze of planners, photographers, and executives. Her satin dress brushed the floor as she practiced the steps she had been instructed to memorize. When the event manager asked her to smile for practice, she whispered, "I would rather." "Not fake it," Adrian overheard. "Try," he said softly, "just this once." She turned toward him. "Why? Because the cameras are watching?" "No," he said after a pause. "Because I am." The words caught her off guard. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause the music, the lights, even the whisper of the staff. His tone had shifted, just slightly, from command to curiosity. That night, back in the penthouse, she replayed his voice in her head. She sat at her desk, opened her sketchbook, and began to draw him not the billionaire, but the man behind the stillness. His expression in the sketch was softer than reality allowed. As she shaded the lines of his face, she remembered the first time she saw him smile, even briefly. She wondered if the man who could smile like that had ever been happy before the world made him cold. When she finished, she closed the book and whispered to the quiet room, "You are not made of ice, Adrian Cole. You are just afraid of the fire." Down the hall, a door creaked open. For a second, she thought she heard his footsteps pause outside her room before fading away. Neither of them knew it yet, but that was the night the contract began to bend quietly, dangerously, toward something neither had signed up for. The evening of the Cole Foundation Gala arrived with the kind of restless electricity that always followed the wealthy. Manhattan glittered beneath the skyline, streets humming with black cars and camera flashes. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers gleamed like constellations. Every guest looked polished, rehearsed, and perfectly sure of their own importance. Evelyn Clarke stood at the edge of the marble staircase, her hands folded to hide the tremor in her fingers. Her gown shimmered a soft champagne color, elegant but understated exactly what the stylists had demanded. Her scar was hidden beneath a sweep of her hair, though she could still feel its faint pulse under her skin, a reminder that beauty had never been her armor. Adrian Cole approached from behind, immaculate in his tuxedo. "You look presentable," he said, voice calm but not unkind. Evelyn glanced over her shoulder. "For a contract bride, that sounds like a compliment." He gave a faint smirk. "Just remember what we discussed. Stay close. Smile when necessary. Say little." She nodded, though a quiet defiance flickered in her eyes. When they entered the ballroom, every head turned. The crowd parted, cameras rose, and the flashbulbs erupted like fireworks. Adrian guided her through the noise, hand light on her back. They greeted politicians, investors, and reporters who smiled too widely and meant too little. Evelyn played her part well, every nod measured, every word precise. Then came the moment she had not expected. The master of ceremonies invited the new Mrs. Cole to speak on behalf of the foundation. Adrian had not planned this. She could tell from the sudden stillness in his posture. He leaned toward her and whispered, "Keep it brief. Say something polite about charity." Evelyn stepped forward to the microphone. Her reflection stared back from a sea of glass and diamonds. For a moment, her voice caught in her throat. Then, quietly but clearly, she began. "When I was a child, my mother told me that true charity is not about money. It is about seeing the people that others overlook." The crowd shifted, listening. "I have been overlooked most of my life," she continued. "Not because of what I lacked, but because people only saw what they wanted to see. But kindness is not a transaction. It is a choice, and sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can build something stronger than money ever could." Silence followed, then applause hesitant at first, then rising like a tide. Cameras flashed again, not out of curiosity, but admiration. Adrian's jaw tightened, but this time it was not anger. It was something he could not name. When she returned, to his side, he leaned close enough for her to hear his whisper. "That was not what we agreed on." "No," she said softly. "It was better." For the rest of the evening, people approached them with genuine warmth. Donors praised her words. Board members smiled at Adrian as though he had made a brilliant choice. For the first time, the contract looked like something real. As the gala ended, he offered his arm. "You surprised me tonight. Good or bad?" she asked. He hesitated. "Both." Outside, the rain had begun again, soft and steady. When they stepped into the waiting car, the city lights blurred against the window. "I meant what I said," Evelyn murmured. "About seeing people." Adrian turned to her. "Do you think anyone ever truly sees you?" She met his gaze. "Not yet, but I think you just did." For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was not cold anymore. It was heavy with something new, something alive. When they reached the penthouse, Adrian opened the door for her, something he had never done before. As she walked past him, her perfume lingered like a memory that refused to fade. That night, he could not sleep. Her voice from the gala echoed in his mind, the way she had stood under those lights with absolute grace. She had broken his rules, but somehow made the entire world believe in them. And for the first time since their marriage began, Adrian Cole realized that the woman he thought was his greatest liability had just become his greatest truth. Night had fallen over Manhattan, stretching the skyline into 1,000 shimmering mirrors. Inside the Cole penthouse, the sound of rain tapped against the windows like a metronome, marking every unspoken word between them. Evelyn Clarke sat curled in the corner of the living room, her sketchbook open on her lap. The pages were filled with moments she could not say out loud, quick drawings of hands, eyes, and the faint curve of Adrian's smile from the gala. Each line felt like a confession written in graphite. She heard the elevator doors slide open. Adrian Cole stepped inside, still in his suit, the edges of exhaustion clinging to him. He loosened his tie, dropped his phone on the counter, and stood quietly for a moment, as if gathering air he could not find in boardrooms or headlines. "You are still awake," he said, voice low. "I could not sleep," Evelyn replied, without looking up. "Too many lights, too many thoughts." He approached slowly, noticing the open sketchbook. "You draw?" "Yes, it helps me see things more clearly." He leaned slightly closer, his shadow spilling over the page. "Is that supposed to be me?" She smiled faintly. "Only the part of you that smiles once a year." Adrian let out a quiet breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Then your drawing might be the only proof it happens." For a moment, the air between them softened. The cold billionaire image he carried began to crack, replaced by something more human. Evelyn closed the book gently. "You do not have to pretend all the time, Adrian. You can just be tired." He looked at her, expression unreadable. "Tired is dangerous in my world. It makes people think you have weaknesses." "Everyone has weaknesses," she said. "That is what makes us real." His eyes darkened with something she could not name: regret, maybe curiosity. "What makes you real, Evelyn?" She hesitated, then answered softly. "The things I have survived, and the ones I still choose to believe in." He turned away, walking toward the window. The city lights reflected in his eyes like small fires. "You speak like someone who has already lost everything." "Maybe that is why I am not afraid to lose you," she said. Her honesty startled even her. The words hung between them, quiet but powerful. Adrian's posture shifted, the way a man moves when the ground beneath him begins to change. He faced her again. "Do you really think you know me?" "No," she whispered, "but I am starting to see the man you try to hide." The silence that followed was not awkward. It was charged like the moment before lightning touches water. Then, without a word, Adrian reached for the fireplace remote and pressed the button. Flames came alive, painting the room in warm amber. He sat down across from her. "Tell me something real, Evelyn. Something no one else knows." She thought for a long moment before speaking. "When I was 12, there was a fire in our neighborhood. I ran in to help a boy trapped inside. I never saw his face, but I still dream about it sometimes." Adrian's hand froze mid-air. The firelight flickered across his face, revealing a sudden stillness. "A boy?" "Yes," she said softly. "He was just a kid, maybe 8 or 9. I remember the sound of glass breaking, and the way he said thank you before I blacked out." Adrian stared at her, his jaw tight. "You saved him?" "I do not know if I did. I never saw him again." He looked away, voice quiet. "Maybe you did more than you think." Evelyn tilted her head, confused, but he did not elaborate. The distance between them returned, but it carried a new weight, a question neither was ready to ask. The night settled around them like a secret that had waited too long to be told. Evelyn turned back to her sketchbook, unaware that she had just opened the door to the truth Adrian had buried for years. The deepest secrets are about to change everything. Subscribe now to catch the dramatic twist that is coming in the next chapter. The next morning began with silence, the kind that carried unease instead of peace. Evelyn Clarke woke to the faint sound of voices outside her room. The house staff whispered hurriedly in the hall, their tone uneasy. When she stepped out, they stopped talking immediately. Adrian Cole was already gone, his breakfast untouched. The morning news flashed across the television in the living room, showing headlines that made her chest tighten. The billionaire's wife a hidden past? Beneath the headline were old photos of her before surgery, before the scars had faded. The captions were cruel, dissecting her face like a scandal. Her hands shook as she reached for the remote, but the damage was already spreading. Within minutes, her phone flooded with messages from unknown numbers, each one uglier than the last. The door opened suddenly. Adrian entered, his jaw set. He carried the newspaper folded in his hand. "You should have told me." Evelyn stared at him. "Told you what?" "That these photos existed. That this would come back." His voice was sharp, more defensive than angry. "I did not think my face was a liability," she said quietly. He looked away, but not before she saw the flash of frustration in his eyes. "You should have trusted me with the truth." She stepped forward. "You are talking about trust. You made me sign a contract that forbids emotions. What truth was I supposed to share with a man who does not believe in them?" The air cracked between them. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Adrian's assistant entered without knocking. "Mr. Cole, the board is demanding a statement. They think this exposure could affect the family brand." Evelyn's stomach turned. "Family brand?" she repeated, the words bitter. "Is that what I am to you? A product with a flaw?" Adrian's silence said more than words. Something inside her broke. She walked past him, grabbed her bag, and said in a calm, trembling voice, "You will not have to worry about your brand anymore." "Evelyn, wait." But she was already moving toward the elevator. As the doors closed, she turned to him one last time. "You wanted no emotions, no interference, no lies. I kept every rule, except the one that said do not fall in love." The elevator descended, each floor another heartbeat pulling her further away. When she reached the ground level, the rain greeted her again, cold and relentless. She walked into the city without an umbrella, her wedding ring heavy in her palm. Back upstairs, Adrian stood frozen in the empty hallway, her words echoing in the silence. For the first time in years, the man who never lost control realized he had just driven away the only person who had ever truly seen him. Rain followed Evelyn Clarke across the city like a shadow she could not escape. By evening, her clothes clung to her skin, her shoes heavy with water. She stopped in front of a small art studio tucked between two old brick buildings. It had once been her mother's dream space, and now it became her refuge. She unlocked the door with trembling hands and stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and turpentine. She turned on the single overhead light, its glow soft and lonely. The studio was filled with unfinished canvases and sketches that had never been meant for display. She placed her wedding ring on the table beside the sketchbook, watching it roll in slow circles before stopping flat. For the first time since signing the contract, she allowed herself to cry, not because of the humiliation, but because she had believed just for a moment that Adrian Cole might have seen her for who she was. Outside, the city buzzed with rumors. Inside, silence settled like ash. Hours later, the studio door opened. Adrian stood there, rain-soaked and breathless, his eyes searching the dim light until they found her. "You should not be here," Evelyn said without turning. "I had to find you," he replied. His voice was rough, stripped of its usual control. "You think I cared about the board? About the brand? I cared because someone hurt you, and I let them." She looked up at him, eyes tired but steady. "You let them because part of you agreed with them." He took a slow step forward. "That is not true." "Then why did you look at me like I was a mistake to manage?" Adrian hesitated, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small photograph, yellowed, water-stained, from years ago. It showed a burned orphanage and a blurry figure of a girl pulling a boy from the flames. "I found this in an old news archive," he said quietly. "You said you once saved a boy from a fire." That boy was me. Evelyn froze. The air in the room thickened. "You?" He nodded. "I never knew your name. I only remembered the scar, the one I saw again the night we met. You carried the pain that should have been mine." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why did you not tell me?" Because I did not know until today, he whispered. And when I realized it, I understood everything I had done wrong. Adrian stepped closer, his voice breaking. I forced a marriage to save my reputation, but you saved my life long before that. You were never a contract, Evelyn. You were the reason I had a second chance. She took a shaky breath, the anger in her chest giving way to something softer, something unfinished. He reached for her hand, but did not touch it. I am not asking for forgiveness. I just want the chance to deserve you. The studio light flickered once, reflecting in the tears on her cheeks. For the first time, she saw no arrogance in his eyes, only truth. And beneath the quiet rain outside, the distance between them began to dissolve. Morning light crept into the art studio, soft and golden, touching the edges of every unfinished painting. Evelyn Clarke stood by the window, her reflection faint against the glass. The storm had passed, but her heart was still learning how to breathe again. Behind her, Adrian Cole stood in silence, the same man who once hid behind contracts and control, now stripped of both. He took a slow breath. I called a press conference this morning, he said. I told them everything. The photos, the lies, the way I failed you. I told them that you saved my life long before I ever knew your name. Evelyn turned to him, surprise flickering in her eyes. You did that? He nodded. They needed to know who you really are, not what the tabloids painted. The world will see you now, Evelyn, the way I finally do. She looked down at the wedding ring still lying on the table. You do not need to fix this for me. I am not fixing it, he said. I am choosing it. You once said everyone has weaknesses. You were right. Mine was fear, fear of love, fear of loss, fear of you, but I am done being afraid. He reached into his pocket and unfolded the original contract, the one she had signed months ago. Without hesitation, he tore it in half, then again, until it was nothing but pieces scattered across the floor. No more rules, he said quietly. No more lies. Just truth. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. And what if the truth is that I am still hurt? Then I will stay until it does not hurt any more, he answered. The simplicity of his words broke something open inside her. She took one step forward, then another, until the space between them disappeared. Adrian reached for her hand, not as a businessman, but as a man who had finally learned what love demanded honesty. He whispered, I do not deserve you. She shook her head gently. Maybe not, but you are trying, and that is enough for now. Outside, the city began to wake. The noise of traffic, the distant hum of life, all seemed softer. Adrian slipped the ring back into her hand. No contracts this time, he said. If you wear it again, it will be because you want to. Evelyn looked at the ring, then at him. Slowly, she smiled and slid it back onto her finger. I guess this time it means love, he smiled back. His first real one, unguarded and human. They stood together in the warm light, the broken pieces of the old contract at their feet, the new beginning written not in ink but in forgiveness. And as the city shone around them, Evelyn whispered, maybe love was never the mistake. Maybe we just needed to learn how to see it. Thank you for joining us for this cinematic adventure. If you want more untold stories of billionaire love and redemption, please subscribe and choose your next true heart journey on your screen now.